What's up everybody? Welcome to the Todd vlog. Told you a few episodes ago that I had a couple of reviews I wanted to do, and so for today's episode I want to review the brand new worship record from Kathryn Scott called We Still Believe. Now, like a lot of you, I first discovered Kathryn Scott on a Vineyard worship record from years ago called Hungry, Falling on My Knees. This was a record that Vineyard did, really sort of a sampler almost of, I think, all maybe UK worship leaders. I remember there were a lot of new worship leaders, new voices, new songwriters, and Kathryn Scott was one of those from within the Vineyard Church. She wrote and performed Hungry. There were a couple of other songs about her. She also sang, I believe, on Breathe, the big song that so many people have sung in the years since then. But it was great. So that's where a lot of us kind of found out about Kathryn Scott. Since then, she's put out 3 or 4 worship records. She's done a lot of co-writing, done a lot of seminar work, and so a lot of us in the worship world know Kathryn. She's got a brand new record, We Still Believe, that's actually produced by Brian Dirksen. Now the interesting thing is that both Kathryn and Brian worked together on Hungry years ago for Vineyard. Those two Vineyard folks now both affiliated with Integrity Music. You don't see a lot of Vineyard folks on that label, but Kathryn and Brian are, and so they've kind of joined forces to do this live worship record. It's really quite good. A couple of things that I noticed about the record that were really strong. Number one is just Kathryn's vocal. She's very, very good. One thing that I had not heard until this record is her doing a lot of upper register work, so singing a lot, maybe more powerful, belting out, more high notes. And that was really interesting to me to hear. She's got a great voice and almost takes on a Sheryl Crow quality when she goes up higher in the range, and so I enjoyed hearing that. The second thing that's so great about Kathryn's songwriting is that she does a really neat thing rhythmically. So, for example, where some songwriters will write a verse and they'll have a chord for 4, and then another chord for 4, and then after that, even a third chord for 4. Kathryn doesn't do that. Kathryn tends to write a lot of her chords and sort of her arrangements in very rhythmical ways. So she might have a chord for 4, and then a minor chord for 2, and then a different chord for 2, and then back for 1, then another one. So she builds in this very rhythmic thing into the song arrangements and then sings her melodies over that, and it makes for what I think is signature Kathryn Scott. On this record you can hear it on a song called Deliverance, which just has such a great rhythmic feel. So it's just this great driving thing that Kathryn does so well. There are some good songs on the record. One thing that I really like is I like her covers. Now I'm normally not a covers type of person, but she does 2 covers of her own stuff. So there's a new version of Hungry and there's a new version of Child of God, which are 2 of her big hits. Then she also does I Believe in Jesus, which is this old worship chorus. I think it was a Vineyard song, I can't remember, but she does it. It's super great. And then There's a Redeemer, which a lot of us know from back at Keith and Melody Green days. Does really good. The cool thing about I Believe in Jesus and There's a Redeemer is that they are definitely built for congregational worship. When she first started them on the CD, I thought, oh, this is going to be more like a solo thing, but they're not. They're built perfectly for congregational worship, and so those are good. A couple other songs that I think are really great. The song I mentioned, Deliverance, Only by Grace, which we're doing at Bethel, We Still Believe, the title track. There's some really, really good songs on the record. And the band is really good. One thing I like when I listen to a live worship record, I like for the band to sound like a band. I don't like for it to sound like there's a different guitar player on every song, or that the genre has changed through 11 songs. So this is really good. I mean, it sounds like these guys got on stage and they played all 11 songs, and I like that. As a worship leader, it's very good to hear a record like that you can pass to your people, and they're not stressed out on having to figure out how to have 18 different effects for a whole record. There are some downsides to the record, not many, but I don't like the higher energy stuff as much as I do the more mellow stuff. I think Kathryn's sort of mid-range ballad, the big anthem ballad, she does so good on that. There are some more upbeat things, some things where they're a little more kind of soulful, more high energy. Those are good, but I think her strength is really those anthems. So that's one kind of downside. The second thing is not really a downside, it's just real interesting to me, and you can hear this on live worship records a little bit. Up until now, I've only been able to hear it on Passion records and maybe a few independent worship releases I've heard. So when you record a live worship CD, you guys know this, there's the people making the music, and so they're singing and playing, and those tracks are being captured. Then there's probably some overdubs after the fact, going back fixing things and doing some retakes or whatever. And then there's this third level of crowd mics where you get people clapping and singing and worshiping. Well, on Passion records and on the Kathryn Scott record, you can hear that there are points in the record where you can hear Kathryn singing some ad-lib stuff on the crowd mics, but not on the stage mics. So the only thing I can theorize is that there are some parts where Kathryn was singing or maybe talking or doing some things that they did not put in the final mix. So they sort of muted her channel when they made the record. But the deal is, you've got these other mics out there that you need the clapping and you need the singing. And so you can hear this really faint sort of Kathryn Scott sort of encouraging people or singing. It's not necessarily a downside, it's just kind of an interesting thing to hear live worship records have all of that kind of colliding. Now, you probably could not hear that if you were just listening in your car, but if you had some good headphones, you could hear that. It's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of hear in live worship records. But the record itself as a whole is very good. I think there's some great songwriting on it. I'd encourage you to check it out. If you're a Kathryn Scott fan, you're probably going to love it. If you're not, maybe you're new, I think you could probably hit iTunes or Napster or something and get a couple of those tracks, Deliverance, Only by Grace, I Believe in Jesus, some of those that I mentioned, which are some of the strongest ones on the record. If you've got the record, you've heard it, I'd love to know what you think. If maybe you have a take on it that I'm not really seeing, you can comment below, and I think it'd be good to find out what you think about this new record. Kathryn Scott, We Still Believe.